"You need a home, and I need a mama," said the little girl to the abandoned mail-order bride. The train whistle screamed its last mournful note as the engine hissed and rolled on, leaving the station behind in a cloud of dust and smoke. Evelyn Harper clutched the handle of her battered trunk, the one possession she had carried across 3 states, and tried not to let her trembling hands give her away. The letters in her pocket felt heavier than iron, letters filled with promises of a future, of safety, of belonging. But he wasn't here. She had stepped down from the train with hope fluttering in her chest, scanning the wooden platform for the tall figure she'd been promised. Instead, she'd been met with whispers, stares, and the unmistakable burn of pity in strangers' eyes. By the time she unfolded the last letter, the one written by a man named Thomas Gray, who had begged her to come marry him and care for his little girl, her heart had already begun to sink. A shopkeeper's wife confirmed it with a simple, cruel phrase. "Mr. Gray passed in the spring, ma'am. Pneumonia. Left behind a daughter and a ranch in need, but no one to greet you now." The ground felt like it had been yanked from under her boots. Everything she had endured, the sleepless nights of doubt, the long journey, the ridicule of the other women on the train who called her foolish, had led her here, abandoned. Evelyn's throat tightened. She forced her back straight, lifting her chin as if pride alone could keep her from breaking. "I will not cry. Not here. Not in front of them." But the townfolk were already dispersing, leaving her stranded on the platform with her trunk and her shame. The sound of soft footsteps broke the silence. Evelyn glanced down to see a small figure staring up at her. A little girl, no older than 6, with tangled dark curls and a calico dress that had seen better days. Her eyes, wide, solemn, and far too knowing for her age, fixed on Evelyn with an intensity that made her chest ache. "You look lost," the girl said softly, tilting her head. Evelyn tried to summon a smile. "I suppose I am." The girl studied her a moment longer, then whispered words that pierced straight into Evelyn's heart. "You need a home, and I need a mama." Evelyn froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The child said it so matter-of-factly, as if she had simply observed the truth of the world and spoken it aloud. Before Evelyn could reply, a rough, commanding voice rang out from behind them. "Clara! What did I tell you about runnin' off?" The girl spun around. A tall man strode toward them, broad-shouldered and sunburned, his hat pulled low. Dust clung to his boots, and his shirt was patched at the elbows, but his presence was as solid as the mountains in the distance. His eyes, steel-gray, hard and guarded, shifted from his daughter to Evelyn, and for a fleeting second something softened in them. Evelyn's heart tripped over itself. This had to be him, the widowed rancher. The man swept Clara up into his arms with a gruff sigh, though his hands gentled as they rested on her back. "I turn my back for 2 minutes, and here you are chattin' with strangers." "She's not a stranger," Clara protested, pointing at Evelyn. "She's the lady I was waiting for." Evelyn's breath caught. The man stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Clara!" His voice was low, warning. But the child pressed on, clinging to his shirt. "Papa, she's the one. She can be my mama." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Evelyn swallowed, forcing herself to speak. "Sir, I'm Evelyn Harper. I was meant to—" Her hand went to her pocket, crumpling the letter. "Your late brother wrote to me. He asked me to come." The man's eyes darkened at the word late. He looked like a man who carried grief as naturally as breathing. "Thomas never told me he'd done such a thing." His voice was flat, but beneath it was a rawness Evelyn recognized all too well, loss, and the unwillingness to trust anyone who might pry that wound open. "I didn't know he was gone until I arrived." Evelyn's voice shook, but she steadied it. If I'd known, I never would have." Her words broke off as the reality hit her again. Nowhere to go. No one to take me in. She gripped her trunk handle harder, fighting for composure. The man let out a long exhale, glancing toward his daughter, who was staring up at Evelyn with hope so fierce it could break the hardest heart. "My name's Samuel Gray," he said at last. "This little one's Clara. And whatever Thomas promised you, I can't give you. I've got a ranch hanjin by a thread and no room for talking in strangers." The words were blunt, but Evelyn noticed he hadn't walked away. His gaze lingered on her just long enough to betray the battle warring inside him. "I understand," Evelyn whispered, lowering her eyes. But Clara wriggled free of his arms, darted forward, and slipped her small hand into Evelyn's. "You can come home with us," she said fiercely, as though daring her father to deny it. "Please, Papa. Please let her." Samuel's jaw flexed, his hands balling into fists at his sides. He opened his mouth to refuse, but the plea in his daughter's eyes stopped him cold. That evening found Evelyn in the back of a wagon, her trunk beside her, the prairie stretching out in golden waves as Samuel drove them toward the Gray Ranch. He hadn't said much since agreeing, grudgingly, to bring her for the night. Just one night, he'd told himself. Just long enough to figure out where she might go next. Clara, however, had filled the silence with chatter, sitting snug between her father and Evelyn, her little fingers twined with Evelyn's as though they had always belonged there. Evelyn watched Samuel from the corner of her eye. His profile was carved in shadows by the setting sun, his features hard, his mouth unsmiling. But when Clara leaned against him, his arm instinctively curved around her. Something about that quiet tenderness unraveled Evelyn's heart. And for the first time since she stepped off the train, she let herself wonder if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as abandoned as she thought. The Gray Ranch was a stretch of weathered fences, sprawling pasture, and a farmhouse that had clearly seen better years. Its paint had long since peeled to gray wood, and the roof sagged in places. But to Evelyn, stepping down from the wagon, it wasn't ruin, it was possibility. Clara hopped off and tugged her hand. "This way. I'll show you my room." Samuel cleared his throat. "Clara, mind your manners. Miss Harper hasn't agreed to stay. She's just stoppin' overnight." The word stung, though Evelyn kept her expression smooth. She had no right to expect more. Still, Clara only grinned and whispered conspiratorially, "Don't listen. Papa says things he doesn't mean." Inside, the farmhouse smelled faintly of wood smoke and dust. A few dishes waited on the counter, and laundry lay folded in a basket. Evelyn could see a man doing his best, but there was an emptiness in every corner, a lack of warmth that no amount of effort could hide. She set her trunk aside and rolled up her sleeves. "If you don't mind, Mr. Gray, I'd be glad to help prepare supper." Samuel gave her a long look, as if weighing whether she was more trouble than she was worth. Finally, he nodded. "Kitchen's yours." By the time the stew bubbled and the bread was pulled warm from the oven, the house smelled alive again. Clara clapped her hands and declared it the best meal she'd ever tasted. Even Samuel, though he tried to eat in silence, couldn't disguise the way his shoulders eased. Afterward, Evelyn helped Clara wash up, humming softly as she dried dishes. Clara leaned against her with an ease that startled Evelyn. The little girl had latched onto her as though she had been meant to arrive all along. When bedtime came, Evelyn tucked Clara in, brushing curls from her forehead. Clara's sleepy whisper tugged at Evelyn's heart. "You're my mama now, right?" Evelyn hesitated, her throat tight. "Not yet, sweetheart. But I'll be here tonight." Clara smiled, already drifting to sleep. Downstairs, Samuel stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. The glow painted his features in sharp lines. He didn't look at her when he spoke. You've done a kindness for Clara today. But tomorrow, I'll take you into town and see about boarding you at the inn until you can make arrangements." Evelyn nodded, though a part of her ached at the thought. "I understand. I never meant to intrude." His gaze flickered to hers then, stormy, conflicted. "It's not that you've intruded. It's that I've already lost one woman who was supposed to make this house a home. I won't put Clara through another disappointment." Evelyn's heart twisted. She wanted to tell him she wouldn't run, wouldn't abandon them. But she knew words alone couldn't undo grief carved that deep. So she only said softly, "I'm not her. And I won't pretend to be. But I do know how it feels to be left behind." Something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, maybe even respect. But he said no more, only turned back to the fire. The next morning dawned with trouble. Storm clouds brewed on the horizon, the kind that could flatten fields and scatter cattle. Samuel saddled his horse before the sun had fully risen. Evelyn, without thinking, grabbed gloves and followed him outside. "You'll need help," she said. "I don't." He stopped as she met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "I may not know cattle, but I'm not helpless. Show me what needs doing." For a moment he searched her face, as though trying to find cracks in her resolve. Then, with a short nod, he handed her a rope. The storm rolled in like a beast. Rain lashed, wind howled, and thunder split the sky. Evelyn's skirts were soaked through, mud clung to her boots, but she didn't falter. She followed Samuel's instructions, driving strays back into the corral, bracing gates against the wind. At one point a frightened calf nearly knocked her down, but Samuel was there in an instant, steadying her with strong hands. "Stubborn woman," he muttered, though there was no heat in it. "Better than useless," she shot back, breathless. And for the first time, he almost smiled. By the time the storm passed, both of them were drenched and exhausted, but the ranch still stood. Clara ran out of the house, squealing with relief, throwing herself at her father and then at Evelyn. "You didn't leave," she cried, clinging to Evelyn's waist. Evelyn knelt, hugging her tight. "I promised, didn't I?" Samuel watched them, his chest rising and falling. Something unspoken lingered in his eyes, something that scared him as much as it softened him. Days stretched into weeks. Evelyn remained, though no one ever spoke of the arrangement. She cooked, mended, and tended the house, but she also laughed with Clara, read stories to her, and even coaxed Samuel into joining their evening games at the table. The townsfolk began to whisper, of course. A widow's rancher and a stray bride? They said she was desperate, they said he was a fool. Evelyn bore it with quiet grace. She had known crueler words in her life. What mattered was Clara's laughter echoing through the halls, and the way Samuel's eyes sometimes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. One night, as autumn pressed close with crisp winds, Samuel found Evelyn on the porch, gazing at the stars. "You've given Clara more than I ever could," he said quietly. Evelyn shook her head. "You've given her everything that matters, your love, your strength. She adores you." He stepped closer, the distance between them charged with something fragile and fierce. "And she adores you. I'd be a fool not to see it." Evelyn's breath caught. "Samuel!" His hand lifted, rough and calloused, brushing a damp curl from her cheek. "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Thomas knew exactly what he was doing when he wrote those letters. Maybe he was giving Clara what she needed. And maybe," his voice roughened, "maybe he was giving me another chance too." The world seemed to still. Evelyn felt the ache of her journey, the wounds of rejection, all of it dissolving beneath the steady warmth of his gaze. She whispered, barely daring to believe it, "Are you asking me to stay?" His answer came not in words, but in the way his hand closed around hers, firm and certain. "Yes," he said simply. "Stay. Not as a guest, but as my wife." as Clara's mamma. Tears blurred her eyes, but her smile was radiant. Yes. Oh, yes. From the window, Clara squealed with delight, clapping her little hands. I told you, Papa. I told you she was our mamma. And for the first time in years, laughter, deep, unburdened laughter, rolled from Samuel's chest, filling the night with a promise of love, healing, and home.